Hey guys, it's Monica at Academic Phoenix Plus, and welcome to a very special tutorial. We are going to be texturing human skin. So how do we get a very bland looking gray-scaled face to look like this? Well, it's going to take a little bit of Substance Painter. All right, so let's go ahead and get started because this is going to be a jam-packed tutorial as we export our model, get it ready for Substance, texture it in Substance, and then bring it back into Maya. So let's go ahead and get started. So you'll notice that I have a whole character here, but I'm just going to be focusing on is the face and the eyes. These characters are already UV mapped, so please make sure to UV map your characters. I have a head right here, and then of course the eyes are also UV mapped like so, so they are ready to go. The first thing we need to do is we need to assign separate materials for our object. Now, I want my eyes to have a lot of information and I want my head to have a lot of information. I feel like the eyes should have its own texture map because they are the eyes to the soul, so it should look as nice as possible. So big texture maps for the eyes, and then I'm going to have a separate texture for this. So how do we do this? Well, the first thing we need to do is assign each object a separate Lambert. So I already created an eye Lambert. So this is a very, simple Lambert. And then I just made it gray. And then I also created a head Lambert, which again is just a Lambert with a color. If we take a look at the attributes, you'll notice that it's just a little bit brighter. This one's a little darker, and I relabeled it, and that was it. So nothing major, just a very simple head and eye Lambert. So it's really important that you separate your eyes and your head with different shaders because that's going to play a big role in Substance. All right, let's grab our models. Let's go to File, Export, Selection. It's up to you if you want to go to the attributes, but I'm going to go ahead and place it. I'm going to be using OBJ, and I have a female head, eyes, and I'm going to go ahead and export. So that's it. Let's hop into Substance. All right, Substance. Let's go up here to the top, File, New. I'm choosing PBR, Metallic Roughness. I'm going to increase my document to 2048, and I'm going to click on Select. Here's my female head, eyes. Perfect. Select that. Click OK. You're going to see two things happen. One, well, here's the head, so that's good. You'll notice here that we have our textures. This is our character, and our UVs are laid out already. Up at the top, we can see that we have Lambert 2 and also a Lambert 4. This is the eye, and this is the head. So if I right-click and edit the name, I can call this head. And for this one, I can just go ahead and edit the name and call this eye. So that's going to be valuable. All right, let's start with the head because that's the one that's going to take us the longest. I'm going to scroll up over here on the bottom left and click on All, and I'm going to type in Skin. And Skin's going to show all of these really cool textures, but the one that I'm looking for is Skin Face because I'm focusing on the face. I'm going to grab this and drag it to the right under Layers. So then we get this result, which is looking really good, but it can actually be better because there's one step that you need to do before you get started, and that's baking all the textures. So over here to the top, I have layers. Let's go to Texture Settings. I'm going to scroll down and go to Bake Mesh Maps. Now, I'm assuming you guys have already watched my previous tutorial, so make sure you take a look at my previous tutorials where I introduced Substance Painter as well as texture a simple object such as a barrel, but it goes over a lot of the fundamentals. So one of the first things we need to do is create Bake a Mesh Maps. So click on that little guy, and I'm going to go ahead and go to my Common tab and make this into 2048 because I do want an actual larger size. And then in ambient occlusion, I'm going to go to ignore backface. I'm going to say always. Once I have that, go ahead and you can turn off ID map and things like that, but I'm going to go ahead and click on bake all texture sets. So that's going to bake not only the head, but it's also going to bake maps for the eyes. So let's take kind of look about how is that going to look like. Now it's baking the eyes. You can see that it's doing eye lid, eye ambient occlusion, eye curvature, eye position, eye thickness. And now we have some cool stuff. So notice what happened to the texture. Because of the baked maps, we're getting a little bit of redness around the eyes and also around the mouth and also around the nose and definitely the ear. Now, I just wanted to show you this. This is, in fact, the texture, and this is why you shouldn't really do overlapping UVs. I mean, I could probably tweak around a little bit more with the attributes, but just keep an eye on that when you're trying to do overlapping UVs. Just kind of just be careful, because sometimes you can get some interesting results. But I'm gonna cover that with hair, so I'm not too worried about that. If your character is in fact bald, you might want to revisit that. So this looks good. I'm happy with it. By the way, just wanted to demonstrate there is another skin if you were interested in choosing. So go back to layers, grab skin feverish, and then you can see the effect. It's kind of zombie looking like, creepy, but that gives you an idea that you can in fact use different types of skin color. So let's analyze our skin shader that we have here. I'm going to open up this little folder, and you're going to notice that we have a couple of things we can play around with. One of them is called skin pores. So if you select skin pores, you kind of scroll down, you'll notice that it's an overlay and we're only seeing 8%. If I increase that percentage to a little bit higher, you can see where the skin pores are being affected. So that's where it's coming from. Now, if you want to increase the scale, for example, or decrease the scale, that's really up to you. But just showing you that if you want to increase the scale, you can actually affect the skin pores. It also has skin detail. Again, you can kind of turn it on and off to see if you see any effect. And then this affects the color. So again, if you wanted to change the color, you can see that you can get a little bit of that white speckles. Just take a look at your own skin. You actually, in fact, have that. We have our base color. As you can see here, you have our, every map possible. We have our skin patches. So that's always fun because you get to see a little bit of that patchiness that happens. Again, it's only at 5%, so if you really want to see the effect, you can increase the percentage, and then you can kind of play around with this. I like the default. I'm leaving it as is, but just keep in mind that you can, in fact, change a couple of things. This is just an ambient occlusion when it comes to subsurface scattering, and then that's how you get the texture. Pretty cool. I made the little white dots a little bit more noticeable because I think it's interesting. Okay, so now that we've done this, what can we do? Well, some people may say, oh, we're done. We're not. This is a very basic shader, and we definitely want to make sure that we add a little bit more to our object, into our model, so that she looks more human and more alive. So the first thing I'm going to do is create a fill layer, and we're going to do what's called color zones. If you have taken any traditional paintings, they really focus on that, as well as, basically any type of trying to create human skin. There's a couple of color zones that we have, and I'm just going to go roughly over them. The first one is our face, like our nose and our cheeks. They usually are a little bit red, right? And the reason why is because that's where most of our blood layers are, and we actually have a lot of skin in that area. So I'm going to right click on our layer, and I'm going to call a black mask. I could just kind of paint in, but it looks really solid and doesn't really give it too much texture, right? So I'm going to go into brushes, and what I'm looking for is something that has a lot of textures that I can play with. So as you can see, we have a lot of things we can play with, and I'm going to be choosing something like maybe, so many options, maybe cotton. And what's nice is that it's going to give me a little bit of that layering. So I can actually go in, I'm going to undo all that, because I also want to scroll down and kind of reduce the transparency. Now this is going to help me with layering. So in case if I draw one big line and then I draw another one and then another one, I can get more of that color. So it kind of helps me with that layering. So my stroke opacity is around 60%. And then I can just kind of go in and just kind of bring that color back. So again, I'm just trying to do some color zones, very, very simple, nothing major. I'm just going to go in and just kind of color the zones. I would recommend that you guys take a look at some of the cool stuff out there. They have a lot of really great video tutorials on color zones. Not video tutorials, but just a regular book. They have a lot about it, and it's really important to kind of understand it, because these color zones is really important to capture. Okay, so this is the red. I know, whoops, I kind of went overboard over here. That's not a problem. I can just click on the letter X, which is going to flip my color, and then I can kind of paint this back. If I went a little too overboard, feel free to reduce the opacity. You can kind of go in and just kind of bring it up a little bit more if you want to. So that's the magic of Substance. All right, So let's say that I can always add more, but I'm just kind of showing you guys this fairly quickly. Let me get rid of this a little bit more, just kind of calm that down. All right, so now that we have this red fill layer, what I'm going to do is go over here to the top right of that layer, and then there's a lot of modes I can choose. I can choose overlay, or I can choose multiply, and you can see how it's impacting the texture. I can do screen if I wanted to, so there's a couple of effects. I'm just going to go ahead and reduce the opacity just a little bit so I can see those red tones, but that's going to help with bringing some color into her skin. So just kind of, it's supposed to be just a little bit of hints of what's going on around her face. Cool. All right, so this is the red layer. This is the red zone. The next one we want to do is, again, turn off all of these guys. We just want color, is yellow. Yellow is going to be in our forehead area. So our forehead area has very little blood vessels because it's mostly our skull. So by using yellow, and I'm trying to get a nice yellow here. Let's get that going over here. So yellow just means that we see, it's like almost seeing the whole skull. Right, so we don't have that many blood vessels around our forehead. So I'm going to right click on this, add a black one, and just like we did before, we're just going to go ahead and color this yellow. Now I'm going to increase my brush because our skull is actually fairly large, so I'm going to go in and start just kind of texturing this around. So again, I'm just using kind of like a opacity filled brush. Zoom out here. Again, I'm just kind of coloring the zones. She's going to have hair, so I doubt we're not going to see this really, but it's important to kind of see how this texture is going to work on our character. So I'm going to go ahead, just kind of paint that in. This is going to be our yellow color zone. This is going to be where our skull is located, and therefore we don't see that much blood. Another area that we don't have that much, it's kind of interesting actually. If I zoom in, I'm going to make this a little bit smaller. We actually have a little bit of yellow around our eyes right here, which I always thought really interesting, but we want to kind of add that little color zone around there. So that's looking all right. Let me zoom in. I just jumped out of ZBrush, so I'm kind of a little off kilter when it comes to the controller, so I keep clicking the wrong buttons, which is what happens when you hop around different versions or different software, but that's okay. I'll figure it out. Let me just make sure I got everything here. Cool, I can always look around here as well on this side. And I think I'm happy with that. All right, so again, you guys can play around and maybe do overlay if you wanted to. You can try different types of colors, but again, I think normal works, and I'm just going to desaturate it. This is just going to be a subtle color, something like that. So let me show you what we've had so far. This is what it started. Actually, it's kind of plain, but by adding a little bit of red and a little bit of yellow, it kind of adds to that. All right, so this is the yellow zone. Now we're going to add another one, and this is our third zone. So we're going to go ahead and hide these, and let's go ahead and trigger the blue. So it turns out that around our chin, we have a little bit more blood vessels around our chin, and we get an interesting color blue. This is very noticeable especially with guys. You guys get older, and you start seeing, that's where you get the 5 o'clock shadows, a little paler around the mouth. Happens to women as well, so it should not be ignored. It's actually kind of, painters back in the day used to paint the lips a little bit slightly green because of complementary colors. So it's interesting what the masters used to do. So I'd highly recommend that you kind of visit traditional paintings to see how they complemented the colors. So I'm going to add a black mask, and just like we did before, we're just going to go ahead and just kind of bring in the blue. Now, this is a young female, so I'm not planning to make this extremely dramatic. But if you guys were creating somebody that was in the, like an older gentleman, or just just depending how old. The older you are, the more noticeable it would be. So you want to go ahead and add that in there. So I'm just kind of bringing in that blue. I'm not too worried about the lips. The lips are obviously going to be less blue, and they're going to be have lipstick and stuff, but that's for later on. But if you want to remove it, you can just paint it out. So again, just click on the letter Z, or I'm sorry, X. That will bring this out, and then we can just zoom in and just kind of remove that if you're interested. All right, so we have blue. You can see that she's already looking a little bit masculine just because of the color that we chose, but I'm going to fade that away. But it's still important that she has that because of her features. And we actually all have the same thing. We have the same blood vessels and things like that around our head. Another thing that we want to add is a little bit of blue around the eyes. Now, depending on how tired they are, this will make a difference. So I'm just going to put a little bit in. But think about if your character is really, really tired, you probably want to enhance that bluish colored lower because you get to see it more. But in this case, I'm just going to make it like this. Again, have some fun. Overlay it if you want to. Multiply it if you want to, if you feel like it adds something. I'm just going to leave it in normal and just go ahead and fade it away. So those are the basic color zones. So we have red. Again, I'd like to kind of demonstrate red, yellow, and blue. And she's already looking a lot more human, which is what we're trying to go for. We're trying to make her look less CG and more human. All right, so let me call this the blue zone. And I'm going to make a folder. I'm going to grab all these guys and just drag it into there. And I'm just going to call this the color zones. All right, cool. The next thing we're going to do is add a little bit more details. So for example, I'm going to add another blue. Again, I don't need a height and all that stuff. I'm just going to stick with the blue or with just a color. And I'm going to choose the blue color. And again, right click, add black mask. And this one is going to be a little bit more interesting because we're going to add some veins. So here is an image of a human skull. And as you can see, we have this giant blue vein that comes in and kind of goes around the skull into our nose. It basically brings blood into our face. And that's what keeps our face moving. So here we go. We're going to mimic something similar. So I like to use this as a reference because I can see that it's thicker around the jaw. There's one around our cheek and there's a couple little ones. So I want to make sure I have this as reference. So I'm moving that to the side. I am going to grab just let's grab, I'm going to go basic soft. And I'm going to make this small. Really small. And I might want to change this color. I feel like it's a little too... Let me just go and pick a better blue. It's been all day just picking blues, I guess. Okay. I think I like that one better. Okay, grab the fill layer. Make sure you've got this one. So this is going to be our texture. So we're going to start off a little bit thicker, and according to the graphic, I'm going to start down here at the bottom. Whoops, and then just kind of follow the jawline. And it's okay to be messy and just kind of go up here. There's another one that kind of stems from the jaw, and it kind of goes around here, and then eventually thins out to the nose. So that's kind of like the basics. And because of my shaky hand, it already looks like a vein just because I'm moving my hand around. And then, of course, I'm going to make this a little smaller. So using the brackets, I can make the little brush smaller. And I can kind of just create a couple of veins. So again, I'm just kind of going in, looking at my reference, trying to see where would a good vein be located. So we could always kind of guess where things are, but it never really looks very good if we guess. So it's important that you go ahead and really make the effort in looking at reference and trying to capture some of that detail. So again, I'm making mine a little smaller because every single vein always has a little tiny ones, like so. Maybe this is too tiny. Just kind of wanders off into the side and kind of splits. Have another one over here. And just kind of, again, I'm looking at reference, just kind of trying to get something that looks like veins. Now, if I feel like this can kind of fade off, you can always click X on your keyboard and that will kind of fade it away as well if you feel like you messed up. And then you can just kind of come in and add it in, whatever you want. So again, you can't really tell, but I'm actually looking around at my reference and just kind of making sure that this is kind of looking small, kind of fading away, and this one is kind of going in and fading into the eye. Now again, take a look at anatomy. It's the human body is amazing, especially the face. I mean, there's so much that we can make mistakes to make it look like less human, but it's really important that we capture that so that we know what it looks like. We can capture it accurately. I always remember when I was learning that I had seriously just created like this random like veins on a character that I was building. And my teacher's like, yeah, that doesn't look real. And I was like, you can't even see them or tell. And she's like, I can tell. And I was like, oh, okay. And it turns out that people can. So it's always, and that's when I learned a big lesson about reference. Like you need to make sure that you're doing reference. All right. So let's say that this is complete. And the purpose for this is that I know I only did one side. But the purpose for this is that it's going to be really, really faded. So really, we're gonna barely see it. But this vein is actually really important in our heads because that's what makes us look alive. These type of little details will make us look alive. Now I'm going to go ahead and reduce it. Notice that it's almost at like 4% to 5%. It is barely recognizable, but it's really important that you have that there so that when people look at this character, you're going to see veins and you're going to see a little bit of it. So it's important to have it. Now it looks a little strong right now. I'm still going to leave it as is, but just keep in mind that we are going to be adding extra stuff to this. So it's not just limited, but again, this just makes it look a little bit more real. Now, depending on your character and depending how translucent they are, that's depending on the melanin, those blue veins are more noticeable on more Caucasian people than in darker people. Keep that in mind that it really depends on the skin type. All right, let's keep going. This is going to be my giant blue vein. I'm not going to spend the time doing the other side, though, of course, you should. And if I have time, I will. But right now, I'm just kind of demonstrating what the power of substance and how to texture skin. Okay, so now we have the giant veins. That's what I'm calling it. I'm not sure what the official name is, but I'm calling it giant veins. And now we're going to create a little extra stuff, which is the sun damage. So right now she's looking pretty clean. And we really need to add even more information to her skin so she looks more real. Depending on the character, of course, and who you're trying to create, it's really important that you think about sun damage. Are these people outside all the time? Are they not? But you still need some sort of information that says that that you've been exposed to the sun. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. Again, we're not using any. We're just doing this for color. We're going to choose something a little bit red, slightly more in the orangey red color. Something like that. You can always change it. It's never set in stone. And just like always, we're going to right click. We're going to add a black mask. And this time we are going to add a fill layer. So I'm going to right click. And down here at the bottom, we have generators and all sorts of stuff. But we're going to add a fill layer, which gives us an opportunity to try something new, which is attaching what's called a spots. So I'm going to type in spots. And you're going to see that we have B, N, W spots. We have 1, 2, and 3. I'm going to click on 2. And you get this. Now, she's looking like a zombie. But the point is that now she's looking like she's got sun damage. Really fast sun damage, which is awesome. And all of this is procedural, which is what blows me away. So if your character has seen like a lot of sun and has no sunblock, this is the way to do it. But that's not really what I want. I'm going to go ahead and right click. I'm going to add a paint layer. And using my brush, so again, kind of look at this. And if you want, you can, I'm going to look for dirt this time. Let's see. I'm going to choose maybe dirt 2. Try that for fun. And using this brush, I can either add it or press X to flip the colors. Again, I'm kind of if you go all the way to the bottom, if you press X, it goes from black to white. And if I choose white, you can see it. And if I press X, choose black, you can fade it away. So I am going to paint some of my damage away. Now again, I'm going to scroll up. I can reduce my stroke opacity so I can kind of fade things away and paint over it where I want to. So you can keep some of that information, but what I'm trying to do is just keep some of this information around, maybe around her cheekbones, maybe a little bit around, but in general, I'm going to be painting a lot of it out. Because I do want her to have these details, but I don't want her to be like completely covered in damage. So again, I'm just kind of going in, kind of painting out some of the damage. If your character has acne, for example, this would be another way of creating like a look that she has, you know, acne, and then just kind of fade that away. So now she's got less sand damage, and she's looking really cool. But I think it's a little strong, so I'm going to go ahead and decrease the opacity. So again, it just kind of adds that extra texture to it because we all have information like that. We all have veins and little things that pop out and zits, and you know, that's what makes us human. And it's important to preserve that when you're creating this because you want to make sure that you can capture these things accurately. So I might bring some of this back. Oops, make sure you grab the paint layer. That's a little strong, then I'm going to fade it away. There you go. Pretty cool. All right, so my character is definitely looking human. So looking at reference is always very valuable because you get to see where some people actually have a little bit more damage around the nose area. Some people have it more around the cheek area. You know, it's you know, everyone's a little bit different. No human body is the same. So you're just going to have to figure out where it is. All right, let's go ahead and take a sun damage. Let's go ahead and relabel that. All right, now that we did some sun damage, I'm going to add a little bit more information such as blue veins. So once again, we're going to create a fill layer. I'm not going to choose anything here. I choose a blue, kind of like that. Let's go with that. I'm going to right click, create a black mask, and I'm going to do a very similar thing. I'm going to right click and then choose a fill. And then I'm going to use the BNW spots. However, I don't want it to be this spotchy. So let's play with some attributes. I can increase the scale. So for example, right now it's, I'm going to maybe change it to 20. And I know it looks a little patterny over here, but we're going to be doing some fun things with it. So under balance, I'm going to change this. I'm going to go ahead and reduce it to 0.25, something around there. So you can see that I'm getting a little bit of those kind of blue veins. And then I'm going to reduce my opacity pretty low so I can kind of get that blue vein feel. If you want to, you can rotate it as well if you find that some of it's not that interesting for you, but you get to play around with the balance if you want to. You can add more, you can add less. You can open up the noise parameter and kind of increase the scale as well if you want to kind of change it. So I'm changing my scale to 2 so you can see that's a little bit more veiny. And now that I have that, let's go back into my fill layer and reduce the opacity. You want to see it, but you also want a hint of it. Let's look around. All right, so let's take a look at our character. She's seen better, I mean, you might be thinking she's seen better days, but at the same time, this is what we started off with, right? It looks okay, but it's very simple. Then we added the color zones. Then we added the giant vein, which is starting to fade away. Then we've got our sun damage. If you want to, you can fade that too. And then we finally have our blue veins, which is not very noticeable. Let me go flip it back, but it's there. And that information is really important. Might want to increase mine a little bit more. And again, you can always add another fill layer and just kind of add and subtract the elements. So that basically covers the human skin. Of course, I highly recommend that you continue looking at reference. If you want to increase or decrease your intensity, you can. You're more than welcome to. I'm going to leave the information there so that it transfers really cool in Maya. All right, so now that that's done, the next part is going to be eyes. That's going to be in our next tutorial. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this interesting and fun. It's always really fun to create human skin because you get to push it to the next level and make your characters look realistic and fun and cool. So it really brings your character it really brings your character to life by texturing it, understanding the color zones, understanding sun damage, understanding the human anatomy, and so on and so forth. So hopefully you found this interesting. If you guys do, please subscribe to my channel and hit the little bell so you don't miss any tutorials. I am in social media and I would love to connect with you guys. So please find me in Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So take a look at that. I would love to connect with you. I would love for you guys to share these videos. And finally, don't forget to take a look at academicphoenixplus.com, where you can find free tutorials, free videos, free ebooks, and so much more. So take a look at academicphoenixplus.com. Thank you again so much for watching. I really appreciate it. Let me know if you have any questions by leaving a comment below, and I will see you next time.